Judge Lawrence Sterling believed he was the law. In his courtroom, the truth wasn't what happened. The truth was whatever he decided it was. He looked down from his high bench at Michael Thorne, a tall, silent black man in an orange jumpsuit, and saw nothing but a statistic, another conviction to boost his re-election campaign, another body to feed the private prison system that lined his pockets. Sterling thought he was crushing a bug. He didn't realize he was stepping on a landmine. He had no idea that the man standing before him wasn't a criminal, but a ghost, a high-level FBI operative sent to dismantle Sterling's empire of corruption from the inside out. And by the time the gavel fell, it wouldn't be Michael's life that ended. It would be the judge's world that shattered. The air in courtroom 4B of the Oakhaven County Courthouse was stale, smelling of old wood polish, sweat, and impending doom. It was a suffocating atmosphere, deliberately maintained by the man sitting on the raised dais. Judge Lawrence Sterling adjusted his glasses, the light reflecting off the lenses to hide his eyes. He was a man of 60, with silver hair meticulously combed back and a jawline that suggested a lifetime of getting his way. He tapped a manicured finger against the case file in front of him. To the public, Sterling was a pillar of the community, a hard-on crime conservative who kept the streets safe. To the people in the know, he was the gatekeeper of the Oakhaven corruption ring. Docket number 44902, the bailiff announced, his voice bored. State versus Michael Thorne. Charges: armed robbery, aggravated assault, and resisting arrest. Michael Thorne stood at the defense table. He was 6'3", built like a linebacker, with a face carved from granite. He wore the county-issued orange jumpsuit, which was 2 sizes too small, straining against his shoulders. His hands were cuffed in front of him, the metal biting into his wrists. Most men in his position looked terrified. They cried, they pleaded, or they looked at the floor in shame. Michael Thorne did none of those things. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Judge Sterling. He wasn't staring in anger, he was studying. He was analyzing the judge's micro-expressions, the slight tremor in the prosecutor's hand, the way the bailiff shifted his weight to his left foot. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Sterling said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you are facing 25 to life. The state alleges that on the night of November 14th, you held up the Jameson liquor store, pistol-whipped the owner, Mr. Kelvin, and fled with $2,000 in cash. Do you understand the severity of these charges?" Michael remained silent for a beat too long. "I understand what I've been charged with, Your Honor." His voice was a deep baritone, calm and controlled. It echoed slightly in the silence of the room. Judge Sterling narrowed his eyes. He didn't like the tone. It lacked fear. "And how do you plead?" "Not guilty," Michael said. A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. It was a small crowd today. Just a few retirees who watched trials for fun, a weeping mother of a different defendant, and 2 uniformed police officers sitting in the back row. Prosecutor Evelyn Vance stood up. She was young, ambitious, and entirely under Sterling's thumb. She smoothed her skirt and addressed the bench. "Your Honor, the state requests that bail be denied. Mr. Thorne is a drifter with no ties to the community. He was found with the stolen cash in his vehicle and a weapon matching the description of the one used in the assault. He is a flight risk and a danger to the public." Sterling pretended to mull this over, pursing his lips. It was a performance. The decision had been made before Michael even walked into the room. Michael's court-appointed attorney, Selina Jenkins, jumped up. Selina was the only person in the room who wasn't part of the script. She was overworked, underpaid, and perpetually exhausted, but she had a fire in her belly. "Objection to the characterization, Your Honor," Selina argued, pushing her messy blonde hair out of her face. "Mr. Thorne has no prior criminal record, not even a parking ticket. The weapon found in his car was a legally registered firearm locked in a safe box in his trunk. And the cash. "Ms. Jenkins," Sterling cut her off, his voice sharp. "Do not try the case during the arraignment. The prosecution has presented compelling probable cause. A weapon was found. The victim has identified your client." "The victim identified him from a lineup conducted by Officer Higgins," Selina shot back, glaring at the burly cop standing by the prosecution table. "A lineup that was highly suggestive, I might add." Officer Higgins smirked. He was a thick-necked man with a buzz cut, the kind of cop who enjoyed the physical aspect of the job a little too much. He was Sterling's muscle on the street. "Enough," Sterling barked, slamming his gavel. "I've heard enough. The defendant was caught with the proceeds of the crime. He assaulted a pillar of our local business community. Bail is denied. Mr. Thorne will be remanded to the Oak Haven County Jail until trial, which I am scheduling for—" He flipped a page on his calendar. "Next Tuesday." "Tuesday?" Selina gasped. "Your Honor, that's 4 days away. I haven't even received full discovery yet. This is a rush to judgment." "This is speedy justice, Miss Jenkins," Sterling sneered. "I run an efficient courtroom. If you can't keep up, perhaps you should find a different line of work. Next case." As the bailiffs moved to grab Michael's arms, Michael didn't flinch. He looked straight at Officer Higgins, then at Prosecutor Vance, and finally rested his gaze on Judge Sterling. For a split second, a chill ran down Sterling's spine. The look in the black man's eyes wasn't the look of a victim. It was the look of a predator watching prey. "Enjoy your weekend, Judge," Michael thought, though his face remained impassive. "It's going to be your last one as a free man." The bailiffs shoved him toward the side door. Michael went willingly. He needed to be on the inside. The Oak Haven County Jail was where the secrets were kept, and Michael Thorne, Special Agent, FBI Public Corruption Unit, was exactly where he wanted to be. The holding cells in the basement of the courthouse were a stark contrast to the polished wood upstairs. Here, it was all concrete, steel, and the smell of unwashed bodies and industrial cleaner. Michael sat on a metal bench, his back against the cold cinder blocks. The cell was crowded. A junkie was shivering in the corner, coming down from a high. 2 gang members were whispering near the bars. Michael closed his eyes and replayed the events that had brought him here. 6 months ago, the FBI had received a tip. A whistleblower from the Oak Haven clerk's office had sent a hard drive to the regional field office. The drive contained evidence of a massive cash for convictions scheme. Judge Lawrence Sterling, in collusion with Police Chief Miller and several high-ranking prosecutors, was railroading innocent minorities and poor whites into prison to keep occupancy rates high for a private prison corporation that was paying them kickbacks. But the evidence on the drive was circumstantial. They needed a smoking gun. They needed to see how the sausage was made. They needed someone to go through the system. Michael volunteered. He was the perfect candidate. A former Navy SEAL turned Fed, he had the physical presence to survive prison and the mental fortitude to endure the psychological torture of a rigged trial. His cover was Michael Thorne, an itinerant mechanic moving across the country. The setup had been almost too easy. He'd driven his beat-up Ford truck into Oak Haven, stopped at a motel, and waited. He knew Officer Higgins patrolled that sector. He knew Higgins had a quota to fill. Sure enough, 2 nights ago, Higgins had pulled him over for a broken tail light, which Michael had checked 5 minutes prior and knew was working. Higgins had dragged him out of the car, planted a bag of cash under the seat, and found the gun Michael had legally stored. The liquor store robbery had happened an hour earlier. Higgins just needed a body to pin it on. Michael was the right size and the right color. "Hey, new guy." Michael opened his eyes. One of the gang members, A guy with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck was looming over him. "You're the one who hit the liquor store, huh?" the guy asked. "Kelvin's place?" Michael looked at him calmly. "That's what they say. Kelvin pays protection to the Grim Reapers," the guy sneered. "You stepped on toes, man. Bad move." Michael stood up slowly. He moved with a fluid grace that made the gang member take a subconscious step back. "I didn't rob the store," Michael said simply. "But if you think I'm someone you can intimidate, you're making a bigger mistake than the judge did." The air in the cell grew tense. The gang member sized him up, looked at the width of Michael's shoulders, and decided it wasn't worth it. He spat on the floor and walked away. An hour later, the heavy steel door buzzed open. "Thorne, lawyer visit," a guard shouted. Michael was handcuffed again and led to a small interrogation room. Selina Jenkins was there, pacing back and forth. She had files spread out over the metal table. She looked frantic. "This is insane," she muttered as Michael sat down. "I've been trying to get the security footage from the liquor store, but the tape has mysteriously gone missing. And the body cam footage from Higgins? Corrupted file. They're scrubbing everything, Michael." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with desperation. "Look, they're offering a plea deal. 5 years. With good behavior, you're out in 3. If we go to trial on Tuesday, Sterling will hammer you. He'll give you 25 yours. He hates going to trial on losing cases, but he loves making examples of people." Michael leaned forward. "Selina." She stopped pacing. "What? No plea deal?" "Michael, you don't understand," she pleaded. "This is Judge Sterling. He has a 98% conviction rate. The jury pool is picked from his golf buddies and people who owe him favors. You cannot win this." "I'm not interested in winning the trial, Selina," Michael said softly. "I'm interested in the truth." "The truth doesn't matter in Oak Haven," she snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "Survival matters. I can't save you if you don't let me." Michael looked at this woman. She was good. She actually cared. That was rare. He decided to give her a crumb, just enough to keep her fighting, but not enough to blow his cover. "Selina, listen to me carefully," Michael said, lowering his voice. "Don't look for the footage of the robbery. It's gone. Higgins destroyed it." "Then how do we—" "Look for the footage from the gas station across the street," Michael said. "The Shell station. It has a camera pointing at the intersection. It would have captured my truck passing by at the exact moment the robbery was taking place inside the liquor store. It proves I couldn't have been in 2 places at once." Selina blinked. "The Shell station. I didn't think of that. It's private property, not city surveillance." "Exactly," Michael said. "Higgins wouldn't have jurisdiction to wipe it immediately. But you have to hurry. Most systems overwrite every 48 hours. You have until tonight." Selina gathered her files quickly. She looked at Michael with a newfound curiosity. "How did you know about the camera angles at the intersection?" "I notice things," Michael said. "Go, get that footage." As Selina rushed out of the room, Michael leaned back. Step 1 was in motion, but he wasn't just relying on Selina. He had his own insurance. Back in his cell, Michael sat on his bunk. He reached into the collar of his jumpsuit. Sewn into the seam, undetectable by a standard pat-down, was a micro-transmitter. He pressed it twice in a rhythmic pattern. Click, click. A signal was sent to a van parked 3 blocks away, where 2 FBI tech agents were monitoring everything. Intercepted audio, FBI surveillance van, 2 Usual PM. "Agent Miller, he signaled. We're green." Agent Ross. "Copy that. I'm tapping into the judge's private line now." While Michael sat in jail, the FBI was listening to Judge Sterling. At that very moment, Judge Sterling was in his chambers, pouring a glass of expensive scotch. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "It's done," Sterling said into the phone. "The drifter is locked up. We pinned the Kelvin job on him. Your nephew is in the clear, Sal." On the other end of the line was Salvatore Sal Moretti, the silent owner of the Oak Haven construction firms, and the man who really ran the town. "Good," Sal's voice rasped. "My nephew is an idiot, but he's family. Make sure this Thorne guy goes away for a long time, Lawrence. I don't want him appealing and digging things up." "Don't worry," Sterling laughed, taking a sip of his scotch. "I appointed Jenkins as his lawyer. She's competent enough to make it look legal, but she's too overwhelmed to find the holes in the case. By Tuesday, Michael Thorne will be a memory." In the surveillance van, Agent Miller smiled and adjusted his headphones. "We got him," he whispered. "Conspiracy to obstruct justice. But we need more. We need to catch him doing it in open court." Back in the cell, Michael stared at the ceiling. The game had begun. Sterling thought he was the cat playing with a mouse. He didn't know the mouse was strapped with C4. The weekend in jail was brutal. Michael had to fend off 2 more intimidation attempts, one from a guard who, accidentally, didn't feed him dinner. Michael stayed calm. He meditated. He visualized the courtroom. Monday morning came. Selina Jenkins returned. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she was grinning. "I got it," she whispered through the mesh of the visitation room. "I got the Shell station footage. It shows your truck a mile away at 9:05 p.m. The robbery call came in at 9:04 p.m. It's physically impossible for you to have been the shooter." "Good," Michael said. "I'm going to file a motion to dismiss immediately," Selina said. "No," Michael said firmly. Selina froze. "What?" "Michael, this proves your innocence. We present this to the judge, and he has to let you go." "He won't," Michael said. "If you show him that evidence now, in chambers, he will find a way to suppress it. He'll say the timestamp is off. He'll say it's grainy. Or worse, the evidence will disappear from the evidence locker before the trial starts. So what do? "We ambush him," Michael said, his eyes hard as flint. "We wait until the trial. We wait until Higgins is on the stand and lies under oath. We wait until the judge admits the fake evidence, and then, when they think they have me buried, we drop the bomb." Selina hesitated. This was risky. It was dangerous malpractice to sit on exculpatory evidence. But looking at Michael, she felt a strange compulsion to trust him. He didn't talk like a mechanic. He talked like a general. "Okay," Selina breathed. "We do it your way. But if this goes south, you're going to prison for life." "If this goes south," Michael said, "prison will be the least of my worries." Tuesday morning arrived, the day of the trial. Michael was dressed in a cheap suit Selina had bought for him at a thrift store. It was tight in the arms. He was shackled and led into the courtroom. This time the room was fuller. The hard-on crime crowd had shown up. Judge Sterling entered, his robes billowing, looking like a king taking his throne. He glared at Michael with disdain. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Sterling sat. "Court is now in session. State versus Thorne. Are we ready for opening statements?" "The state is ready, Your Honor," Prosecutor Vance chirped. "The defense is ready," Selina said, her voice shaking slightly. Michael sat back. He watched Sterling smile at the prosecutor. A conspiratorial smile. "Go ahead, Judge," Michael thought. "Start the show. Dig your grave deep." The trial began not with a bang, but with the suffocating weight of inevitability. The courtroom air conditioning was broken, making the air thick and humid. The jury, 12 citizens selected mostly because they looked tired and compliant, fanned themselves with information pamphlets. Prosecutor Evelyn Vance paced in front of the jury box. She was painting a picture of terror. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance began, her voice trembling with practiced outrage. "Oakhaven is a peaceful town, a place where you can leave your doors unlocked. But men like Michael Thorne," she pointed a sharp, manicured finger at Michael, "men like him come here to prey on our peace. He didn't just rob a liquor store. He pistol-whipped an innocent business owner. He laughed as he did it." Michael sat motionless. He watched the jury. 3 of them looked at him with fear. 2 looked bored. One, an older man in the back row, was staring at Judge Sterling with a furrowed brow, perhaps sensing the fix was in. The state called its first witness, Mr. Kelvin, the owner of Jameson Liquor. Kelvin was a small, balding man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He shuffled to the stand, avoiding eye contact with everyone, especially the defendant. "Mr. Kelvin," Vance asked gently, "is the man who robbed you in this courtroom today?" Kelvin hesitated. His eyes darted to the back of the room, where a man in a dark suit sat, an associate of Sal Moretti. The message was clear. "Yes," Kelvin whispered. He raised a shaking hand and pointed at Michael. "That's him. The big guy. Are you certain?" I'm certain." Selina Jenkins stood up. "Objection. The witness sounds coerced." "Overruled," Judge Sterling barked, slamming his gavel so hard a pen rolled off his bench. "The witness is traumatized, Ms. Jenkins. Show some respect. Continue, Miss Vance." Michael leaned over to Selina. "Let him go," he whispered. "He's just a pawn. Go after the knight." The knight was Officer Higgins. When the prosecution called Higgins to the stand, the mood in the room changed. Higgins walked with a swagger. He chewed gum, which he stuck under the railing before sitting down. He smirked at the judge, a subtle acknowledgement of their shared secret. "Officer Higgins," Vance said, "tell us how you apprehended the suspect." "Well," Higgins started, leaning into the microphone, "I was on patrol near the interstate. I saw a vehicle matching the description of the getaway car, a beat-up Ford truck. I initiated a stop. The driver, Mr. Thorne, was belligerent. I smelled alcohol. I asked him to step out. And that's when I saw the bag of cash under the seat and the handle of a .45 caliber pistol sticking out of the glove box." "Did the defendant say anything?" "Yeah." Higgins chuckled. He said, "You caught me, pig. I did it." A gasp went through the gallery. Selina Jenkins shot up. "Objection. Hearsay. And my client never made that statement. There is no recording of it." "The officer's body cam malfunctioned," Judge Sterling interjected smoothly, answering for the prosecution. "Technological errors happen, Ms. Jenkins. The sworn testimony of a decorated officer of the law is evidence enough." "Overruled." Michael felt a cold rage simmering in his gut. It wasn't just the lies, it was the laziness of it. They didn't even try to make it believable because they knew they were untouchable. Sterling looked at Michael with a look of utter boredom, checking his Rolex. "You think you're writing the ending, Judge," Michael thought, "but you just wrote your confession." As Higgins finished his testimony, confirming the time of the arrest and the violent struggle Michael supposedly put up, the prosecution rested. "Your witness," Vance said, sitting down with a smug smile. Selina Jenkins stood up. Her hands were trembling, but she grabbed the folder containing the screenshots from the Shell Station video. She looked at Michael. He gave her a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Execute," his eyes said. "Officer Higgins," Selina began, walking to the podium. She didn't look like a high-powered attorney. She looked like a frazzled public defender. Higgins underestimated her instantly. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You stated that you pulled my client over at 9:15 p.m., correct?" "That's right," Higgins said. And the robbery at Jameson Liquor occurred at 9:05 p.m. Give or take a minute. Yeah. And the distance between the liquor store and the spot where you arrested Mr. Thorne is approximately 3 miles? About that. So, Selina said, feigning confusion. Mr. Thorne would have had to rob the store, flee the scene, and drive 3 miles in 10 minutes to be where you found him. That's plausible. He was driving fast. Higgins shrugged. Officer, you also testified that you saw the gun in the glove box immediately. Yes. But in your police report, Selina held up a piece of paper, you stated the glove box was closed and locked, and you found the key in Mr. Thorne's pocket after you handcuffed him. Which is it? Higgins blinked. He looked at Prosecutor Vance. Vance looked down at her notes. I misspoke in the report, Higgins stammered. It was open. It must have popped open when he hit a bump. Interesting, Selina said. She walked back to her table and picked up a USB drive. Now, officer, you stated that you were the only unit in the area, and that you maintained visual contact with the suspect's vehicle from the moment you saw him until the arrest. That's correct. I'm a thorough cop. And you are absolutely certain that the man sitting here, she pointed to Michael, is the man you saw driving that truck at 9:15 p.m.? 100%. Selina turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce Exhibit D into evidence. Judge Sterling sighed loudly. Ms. Jenkins, we are trying to wrap this up by lunch. What is Exhibit D? It is security footage, Your Honor, Selina said, her voice gaining strength. Footage? Sterling narrowed his eyes. From where? The liquor store footage was lost. Not from the liquor store, Selina said. From the Shell gas station on Route 9, 3 miles west of the liquor store, and 10 miles away from where Officer Higgins claims he made the arrest. Sterling froze. The color drained slightly from his face. Approach the bench. Selina walked up, flanked by Vance. Where did you get this? Sterling hissed, his microphone muted. I subpoenaed it directly from the franchise owner this morning, Selina whispered. It's time-stamped. This is a surprise ambush, Vance argued, looking panicked. We haven't had time to authenticate it. It's exculpatory evidence, Selina said firmly. If you suppress this, Your Honor, it's a reversible error on appeal. Sterling looked at Michael. Michael was just watching him. The judge realized he was in a corner. If he refused it outright with no reason, it looked too suspicious. He had to play it cool. I will allow it, Sterling said through gritted teeth. But make it quick. Selina returned to the defense table and plugged the USB into the court projector. A grainy but clear video appeared on the white screen. It showed the interior of a gas station. In the corner, the timestamp read 9:14, 9:04:32 p.m. Officer Higgins, Selina said, please look at the screen. In the video, a tall black man in a distinct orange flannel shirt walked up to the counter. He bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum. He looked directly at the camera. It was Michael Thorne. Officer Higgins, Selina said, her voice ringing through the silent courtroom. The robbery took place at 9:05 p.m. This video shows my client purchasing water at a gas station 3 miles away at 9:04 p.m. Unless Mr. Thorne can teleport, he could not have been robbing the liquor store. The jury began to whisper. The older man in the back row sat up straight, crossing his arms and glaring at the prosecution table. Higgins turned red. That timestamp could be wrong. Those machines are never right. We checked, Selina said. It is synced to the atomic clock via satellite. And furthermore, she clicked a button. The video advanced to 9:10 p.m. The video showed Michael walking out to his truck. He got in and drove away from the direction of the arrest. Officer Higgins, Selina said, You claimed you were following him at 9:15 p.m. heading east. This video shows him heading west at 9:10 p.m. Your entire timeline is a fabrication." "Objection!" Vance screamed, standing up. "Argumentative." "Sustained!" Judge Sterling roared. He looked furious. The veins in his neck were bulging. The narrative was crumbling. He had to stop this. "The jury will disregard the video evidence," Sterling shouted. The courtroom went dead silent. "Excuse me, Your Honor?" Selina asked, stunned. "You heard me," Sterling yelled. "This video has not been properly authenticated by a forensic expert. For all we know, it is a deep fake AI generation. In my courtroom, we do not allow unverified digital trickery to confuse the jury. I am striking Exhibit D from the record. The jury is ordered to forget they saw it." "You can't do that," Selina cried out. "It's plain as day. You're suppressing proof of innocence." "One more word, Ms. Jenkins, and I will hold you in contempt." Sterling pointed his gavel at her like a weapon. "Sit down." Selina stood there, shaking with rage and disbelief. She looked at the jury. They looked confused, but they had their orders. Sterling adjusted his robes. He looked at Michael with a sneer of triumph. "I am the law," his look said. "I decide what is real." He didn't know that 3 blocks away, inside the FBI van, the recording equipment was redlining. "Did you get that?" Agent Miller asked, his voice tight. "Crystal clear," Agent Ross replied. "Judicial misconduct, obstruction of justice, deprivation of civil rights under color of law. We have him." "Should we move in?" "Not yet," Miller said. Michael gave the signal to wait. He wants the finale. The trial resumed after a tense lunch break. The atmosphere was poisonous. Selina Jenkins sat slumped at the table, defeated. She knew the fix was in. The judge had just erased reality. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Sterling said, looking down at the defendant, "since the defense has no admissible evidence, we will proceed to closing arguments." "Actually, Your Honor," Michael spoke up. The deep timbre of his voice silenced the room. He didn't stand up. He just sat there, leaning back, looking entirely too comfortable for a man about to be sent to prison for 20 years. "I would like to take the stand," Michael said. Selina grabbed his arm. "Michael, no. They will rip you apart on cross-examination. You have a right to remain silent." "I'm done being silent," Michael said calmly. Sterling smiled, a predatory smile. He wanted this. He wanted to humiliate this man personally. "The defendant wishes to testify." "Very well. Swear him in." Michael walked to the witness stand. He placed his large hand on the Bible. He swore to tell the truth. He sat down and adjusted the microphone. He looked at the jury, then at Higgins, then at Vance, and finally, he locked eyes with Judge Sterling. "Mr. Thorne?" Selina asked nervously. "Did you rob the liquor store?" "No." "Did you resist arrest?" "No." "Then why did Officer Higgins say you did?" Michael leaned into the mic. "Because Officer Higgins is on the payroll of the Moretti crime family, just like the prosecutor, just like the man sitting on that bench." Chaos erupted. "Objection!" Vance screamed. "Order! Order!" Sterling hammered his gavel furiously. "Mr. Thorne, I will have you gagged. You will not make slanderous accusations in my court." "It's not slander if it's true," Michael said, his voice cutting through the noise. He didn't shout. He commanded. "Lawrence Sterling, you have an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under the name Libra Holdings. Every month on the 15th, a shell company owned by Sal Moretti deposits $50,000 into that account. In exchange, you ensure that his competition gets locked up and his soldiers get walked." Judge Sterling's face went from red to ghost white. His hand gripping the gavel began to shake uncontrollably. "Bailiff!" Sterling shrieked, his voice cracking. "Remove the defendant! Remove him immediately. Declare a mistrial. This man is insane." 2 bailiffs moved toward Michael. Michael stood up. He didn't take a fighting stance. He just stood to his full height, radiating an authority that made the bailiffs hesitate. "Officer Higgins," Michael continued, turning his gaze to the corrupt cop. "You tampered with the evidence locker on the night of October 2nd. You stole 3 kilos of cocaine, seized from the cartel, and sold it back to the streets. You used my arrest to cover a quota deficit because the chiefs threatened to demote you." "Shut up!" Higgins yelled, reaching for his taser. "Shut him up!" "I'm not done," Michael said. He looked at the jury. "This court is a farce, but the evidence isn't gone. It's already been transmitted." "Transmitted?" Sterling whispered. "To who?" Michael reached into his pocket. The bailiffs tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, Michael pulled out a simple, silver badge. He clipped it onto the front of his orange jumpsuit. Special Agent Michael Thorne, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that followed was heavier than the grave. "FBI?" Selina Jenkins whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Judge Sterling slumped back in his chair. It was as if the strings holding him up had been cut. "The doors," Michael said, looking at the back of the room. The double mahogany doors of the courtroom burst open with a crash that shook the walls. "Federal agents, nobody move!" 12 FBI agents in tactical gear, led by Agent Miller, swarmed into the room. Their weapons were drawn, but they weren't pointed at Michael. They were pointed at the bench. "Judge Lawrence Sterling," Agent Miller shouted, marching down the center aisle. "You are under arrest for racketeering, bribery, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit civil rights violations." Sterling looked around frantically. This is a mistake. You have no jurisdiction here. I am a judge of the Superior Court." "Not anymore," Michael said. He stepped down from the witness stand. He didn't look like a prisoner anymore. He looked like the executioner. "Cuff him," Michael ordered. Officer Higgins tried to make a run for the side exit. 2 agents tackled him before he got 3 steps, slamming him into the prosecutor's table. Prosecutor Vance sat in her chair, weeping, her head in her hands. Agent Miller walked up the steps to the bench. He pulled Sterling out of his high leather chair. The judge, who had looked so imposing moments ago, now looked small and frail. He was dragged down the steps, his robes tangling around his legs. As they slapped the handcuffs on Sterling, Michael walked over to him. Sterling looked up, his eyes full of terror and confusion. Who are you?" Michael leaned in close, so only Sterling could hear. "I'm the one verdict you can't overturn." "Take him away," Michael said. The courtroom was in pandemonium. The jury was standing, mouths agape. The gallery was filming with phones. Selina Jenkins was still sitting at the defense table, staring at Michael as if he were an alien. Michael turned to her. He offered a small, genuine smile. "You did good, Selina. You're a hell of a lawyer." Selina stammered. "I had no idea." "I know," Michael said. "That's why it worked." But the story wasn't over. Arresting Sterling was just the beginning. The hard karma Michael had promised wasn't just about prison. It was about dismantling the entire legacy Sterling had built and facing the man who pulled Sterling's strings, Sal Moretti. Sal wasn't in the courtroom, and Sal Moretti didn't like loose ends. As the agents led Sterling out, Michael's earpiece crackled. "Thorne," Agent Ross said urgently. "We have a problem. We just intercepted a call. Sal Moretti knows. He sent a hit squad to the courthouse. They aren't coming to break Sterling out. They're coming to silence him before he talks." Michael looked at the glass windows of the courtroom. "Get down!" he roared. Glass exploded inward as bullets shredded the high-arched windows of courtroom 4B. The gallery screamed, scrambling over pews, diving for the floor. The sound was deafening, the sharp crack, crack, crack of automatic rifles echoing off the mahogany walls. "Stay low! Stay low!" Agent Miller shouted, dragging Judge Sterling behind the thick oak defense table. Michael Thorne didn't scramble. He moved with the precision of a machine. He flipped the heavy prosecutor's table onto its side, creating a barricade for Selina Jenkins and the terrified court reporter. "Stay here," Michael commanded Selina. "Don't move until I say." "Who are they?" Selina cried, clutching her files to her chest. "Clean-up crew," Michael said, pulling a standard-issue Glock 19 from the holster of a fallen agent who had been grazed by glass. "Moretti doesn't want Sterling talking to the feds. He's cutting his losses." Michael Army crawled across the floor to where Sterling was huddled. The judge was weeping, his expensive robes covered in dust and glass shards. He looked pathetic. "They're shooting at me," Sterling gibbered, his face pale. "Why are they shooting at me? I'm their partner." Michael grabbed Sterling by the collar of his shirt, hauling him close. "You were never their partner, Lawrence. You were their employee, and now you're a liability. You see that?" Michael pointed to a bullet hole in the wood paneling, inches from Sterling's head. "That's your severance package." "Save me," Sterling begged, clutching Michael's arm. "Please, I'll tell you everything. I have the ledgers. I have the recordings." "Keep your head down," Michael growled. Outside the double doors, heavy boots stomped in the hallway. The local police were confused, paralyzed by the sudden arrival of the FBI, but Moretti's hitmen, mercenaries hired from out of state, were focused. "Breach!" a voice yelled from the hallway. The double doors were kicked open. 3 men in tactical black, wearing balaclavas, stormed in. They weren't looking to arrest. They were spraying the room with suppressed fire, aiming for the judge's bench. Michael popped up from behind the overturned table. Pop, pop, pop. 3 shots, 3 hits. The first mercenary crumpled. The second spun around, clutching his shoulder. The third dove for cover behind a pew. "Miller, flank left!" Michael barked. Agent Miller, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, nodded and signaled 2 other agents. They moved in a tactical formation, suppressing the remaining gunmen. But the real threat wasn't the front door. "The back," Michael realized. "The judge's chambers," Sterling's private entrance behind the bench. It was unsecured. Michael vaulted over the railing, sprinting toward the raised dais, where Sterling had sat in judgment only minutes before. He hit the door to the chambers just as it opened. A massive hitman stood there, raising a shotgun. Michael didn't hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into the man's midsection, tackling him back into the plush office. The shotgun went off, blasting a hole in the ceiling. They crashed onto Sterling's Persian rug. The hitman was strong, but Michael was lethal. The fight was brutal and short. Michael blocked a punch, twisted the man's wrist until it snapped, and delivered a knockout blow to the temple. Breathing hard, Michael stood up. He looked around the judge's chambers. It was a shrine to corruption. Pictures of Sterling on yachts, cases of rare wine, and a wall safe that was partially open. Michael grabbed the hitman's radio. "Target secure," a voice crackled on the other end. "Is the judge down?" Michael keyed the mic. "The judge is in custody, and you're surrounded." Sirens began to wail outside. Not just Oak Haven police, but state troopers and FBI tactical reinforcements. The cavalry had arrived. Michael walked back into the courtroom. The firefight was over. The remaining mercenaries had surrendered once they realized they were outgunned. The room was a wreck. But in the center of it all, huddled under the table, Judge Sterling was alive. Michael walked over and hauled him up. "It's over, Lawrence," Michael said. Sterling looked around at the destruction, the bullet holes in his bench, the shattered seal of the state on the wall. The illusion of his power was gone. I want to make a deal," Sterling whispered, his voice trembling. "I can give you Sal Moretti. I can give you the mayor. I can give you everyone. Michael snapped the handcuffs back onto the judge's wrists. You're going to talk, Michael said cold, but not to make a deal. You're going to talk because it's the only thing that will keep you out of general population with the men you put there. As they led Sterling out of the ruined courthouse, the press was already swarming. Cameras flashed. For the first time in his life, Judge Sterling wasn't walking out to applause. He was doing the perp walk. And in the crowd, Selina Jenkins stood next to Michael. You saved his life, she said, shaking her head. After everything he did to you. I didn't save his life, Michael said, watching the squad car door slam shut on Sterling. I saved his testimony. Death is too easy for men like him. He needs to live with what he became. 6 months had passed since the shootout at the Oakhaven County Courthouse, but the scars on the building were nothing compared to the scars being exposed in the federal district court in the state capital. This was not Judge Sterling's kingdom. The federal courthouse was a monolith of glass and steel, cold and impersonal. There were no bailiffs here who owed Sterling favors, no clerks who would lose a file for $100, and no prosecutors looking to pad their conviction rates. Here, the air smelled of floor wax and absolute, unyielding accountability. The courtroom was packed. Every seat in the gallery was taken by journalists, victims of Sterling's corrupt rulings, and the families of men falsely imprisoned. In the front row sat Michael Thorne, no longer in an orange jumpsuit. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, his FBI badge clipped discreetly to his belt. Next to him sat Selina Jenkins, the newly appointed interim district attorney for Oakhaven, who looked both exhausted and vindicated. Judge Lawrence Sterling sat at the defense table. He looked like a husk of his former self. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a twitchy, desperate, nervous energy. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was thinning and grey. He wasn't wearing his judicial robes. He was wearing a generic, ill-fitting suit provided by his public defender. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The trial itself had been a bloodbath. Michael and his team had been thorough. They hadn't just caught Sterling. They had dissected him. Over 3 weeks, the prosecution had laid out a tapestry of corruption, so dense it made the jury audibly gasp. They played the audio recordings from the bug in Sterling's chambers. The jury heard Sterling laughing as he sentenced a teenager to 10 years for possession of a single joint, just to meet a quota. They saw the bank records of Libra Holdings, tracing the blood money from Sal Moretti's construction firms directly into Sterling's offshore accounts. They heard testimony from the hitmen who had tried to kill him, men Sterling had once protected. But the most damning moment came from Sterling himself. In a desperate bid for leniency, he had turned state's evidence. He had ratted on everyone. He gave up Sal Moretti, who was currently facing a life sentence in a Supermax facility. He gave up the police chief. He gave up the mayor. Sterling had burned his entire world to the ground in the hopes that he could walk away from the ashes. Now, it was time for sentencing. The presiding judge was Judge Eleanor Harper. She was a legend in the federal circuit, a woman known for her intellect and her utter lack of patience for corruption. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at Sterling with an expression of profound disgust. "Lawrence Sterling," Judge Harper began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "Please stand." Sterling scrambled to his feet, his hands trembling. "Yes, Your Honor. I am standing." "In my 30 years on the bench," Harper said, her tone conversational but deadly, "I have sentenced murderers, terrorists and cartel leaders, but I have rarely stood in the presence of someone who disgusts me as much as you do." Sterling flinched, as if he'd been slapped. "Your Honor, I cooperated. I gave you Moretti. I helped the FBI." You helped the FBI because you were caught, Harper corrected him sharply. You didn't find a conscience, Mr. Sterling. You found a calculator. You weighed your options and decided that betraying your co-conspirators was your best chance at survival. That is not remorse. That is cowardice. She opened the file in front of her. You took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Instead, you treated it like a menu, picking and choosing who received justice based on the size of their wallet. You turned the Oakhaven court into a slaughterhouse for the poor and a playground for the rich. You personally oversaw the wrongful conviction of over 300 individuals. She paused, letting the number hang in the air. 300 lives. The prosecution has recommended a sentence of 20 years, Harper said. Sterling let out a breath he had been holding. 20 years. He could do 20 years. With good behavior, parole. Maybe he'd be out in 12. He could survive that. He started to nod, a flicker of hope returning to his eyes. However, Harper continued, her eyes narrowing, I am not bound by the prosecution's recommendation, and in this case, I find it woefully insufficient. Sterling's head snapped up. What? You didn't just break the law, Mr. Sterling. You poisoned the public's trust in it. That is a wound that takes generations to heal. Judge Harper picked up her gavel. It looked heavy in her hand. For the crimes of racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, and deprivation of rights under color of law, I hereby sentence you to 40 years in federal prison. 40? Sterling shrieked. I'm 60 years old. That's a death sentence. Then you better start praying for longevity, Harper said coldly. But I am not finished. The room went dead silent. Usually, federal prisoners are sent to facilities based on security levels and availability, Harper said, leaning forward. However, the Bureau of Prisons grants me discretion to recommend placement. You requested a minimum security facility in Florida. A camp, I believe you called it. Yes, Sterling stammered. For my health. I have a heart condition. I have reviewed your request, Harper said, and I am denying it. It has come to my attention that due to the overcrowding you helped create, the federal system has leased cell blocks in state facilities to house overflow prisoners. One such facility has a dedicated wing for federal inmates. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a shark. I am remanding you to the custody of the Oakhaven Correctional Facility. The color drained from Sterling's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His knees gave way, and he had to be held up by his attorney. No, he whispered, his voice cracking. No, you can't. Your Honor, please, that's where they are. Who? Harper asked innocently. The gangs, the Grim Reapers, the men I sentenced. Sterling was screaming now, tears streaming down his face. If you put me in Oakhaven, they will kill me. It's a death warrant. It is a facility that you repeatedly certified as safe and humane in your own rulings, Harper noted, consulting a document. In State v. Johnson, you ruled that the overcrowding and violence in Oakhaven were exaggerated complaints by delinquents. Surely, if it was good enough for the men you sent there, it is good enough for you. Please, Sterling wailed, struggling against the marshals who were now gripping his arms. I'll do anything. Send me to Supermax. Send me to Solitary. Don't send me back to Oakhaven. The sentence is passed, Harper said, her voice like a closing casket. Get him out of my sight. Slam. The gavel struck the wood with a finality that shook the room. Sterling's screams echoed through the courtroom as he was dragged away, kicking and pleading. The gallery watched in stunned silence, followed by a slow, rising murmur of approval. It was the sound of balance being restored. Michael watched the doors close on the man who had tried to bury him. He felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction. He turned to Selina. 40 years, Selina breathed. In Oakhaven, he won't last a month. He might, Michael said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Fear is a powerful motivator. He wanted to be the king of Oakhaven. Now he gets to live in the dungeon. 2 days later, a transport bus rolled through the barbed wire gates of Oakhaven Correctional. The sky was grey, and the prison yard was loud with the sounds of shouting and clanging weights. Lawrence Sterling, shackled hand and foot, shuffled off the bus. He was dressed in the same orange jumpsuit he had forced Michael to wear. It was itchy, tight, and smelled of industrial detergent. He kept his head down, trying to make himself invisible. But in prison, nobody is invisible, especially not a celebrity. "Yo, check it out!" a voice shouted from the yard. Sterling flinched. He tried to walk faster toward the processing intake, but the guards, men whose pensions Sterling had threatened during union disputes, were in no hurry. They let him stand there, exposed. "That's him!" another voice roared. "That's Judge Hang'em High!" Sterling looked up, terrified. Pressed against the chain-link fence of the yard were dozens of inmates. He recognized faces. He recognized tattoos. He saw members of the Reapers. He saw members of the cartel. He saw men he had mocked, men he had ignored, men he had framed. And then he saw him. Leaning against the fence, looking calm and dangerous, was the gang member from the holding cell. The one with the spiderweb tattoo on his neck. The one Michael had unnerved with a single look. The man smiled, revealing a gold tooth. He pointed a finger at Sterling, mimicking a gavel falling. "Order in the court," the man mouthed. Sterling began to hyperventilate. The guards finally shoved him forward. "Move it, inmate!" The guard spat. "Welcome home." As Sterling walked into the darkness of the cell block, the chanting started. It began low, a rhythmic thumping of fists against bars, and grew into a roar that shook the concrete walls. "Judge, Judge, Judge." The heavy steel door of his cell slammed shut. Sterling backed into the corner, curling into a ball on the thin mattress. The lights flickered. He was alone, yet surrounded by 1,000 enemies. The hard karma Michael had promised hadn't just hit back. It had swallowed him whole. Back in town, the sun was setting over a changed Oakhaven. The boarded-up shops were reopening. The police cruisers were patrolling, not prowling. Michael stood by his truck, the engine idling. Selina Jenkins handed him a coffee. "The mayor resigned this morning," Selina said, "and the governor is appointing a special committee to review all of Sterling's past cases. We're going to be busy for years." "It's good work," Michael said. "You're the right person for it." "I still can't believe you were FBI the whole time," Selina said, shaking her head with a smile. "You know, for a while there, I really thought I was defending a mechanic." "I am a mechanic, in a way," Michael said, opening the door to his truck. "I just fix different kinds of broken machines." "Where to next?" Selina asked. "Wherever the system is rigged," Michael replied. He looked at her one last time. "Take care of this town, Selina." "I will." Michael threw the truck into gear and pulled onto the main road. He didn't look back at the courthouse. He didn't look back at the prison. He just drove toward the horizon, a silent guardian, moving on to the next fight, leaving justice in his wake. And that is the story of how one corrupt judge thought he could frame a nobody, only to find out he was framing the one man who could bring his entire empire crashing down. Judge Sterling learned the hard way that when you sell justice, eventually the bill comes due. He wanted to fill the prisons. Well, he got his wish. He became the final occupant. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes justice and brutal karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. What do you think? Did the judge deserve that sentence? Or was it too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.